Oh, okay.
So like organizing. It's about culture.
Yes.
After Katrina.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I love Dr. Ward. He's always Jerry Ward. Yes. 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 Yes, he is. First I
So we are live. So thank you, and we'd love to go ahead and get started.
All right, y'all. We're about to introduce Dr. Violet Bryan.
Larry Brown, who's our author. And we both have 5 questions.
And
And he asked his author.
So-
It's all right.
It's all right. It's always in community.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, y'all. Today here at Community Book Center, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Violet Bryan with us today to discuss her book on Erna Brodber and Velma Perlard, sisters, their literature, their life, and their work, folklore and culture in Jamaica. Dr. Violet Bryan is Professor Emeritus from Xavier University, also taught at Dillard, and we're so fortunate to have you here today to discuss and present to us this work, which is also in reverence to our dead and our ancestors, and looking at that through these 2 sisters, and we're just really grateful to have you here. So come on over, you can get your books. Dr. Violet Bryan will be signing them, discussing the work, and we'll be here from now until 6 p.m.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right.
This is
Yes.
my copy, so I'm gonna keep it.
This is like.
Is it signed? Is it signed?
Not yet.
Actually, I have a lot of copies at home, but thank you very much. Yeah, right. I'm happy to be here, and I used to come all the time, but recently I've been just staying around home. But anyway, I did teach at Dillard and Xavier, and now I am a professor emerita. But this book took a long time to write. I think maybe because I had so many ideas and I wanted to do a good job. It turned out to be kind of small, but anyway, it's very, very good. I hope it's good for everyone. Because Velma Pollard and Erna Brodber are 2 sisters, both writers as well. And they were raised in Woodside, St. Mary, Jamaica. And they write about that part of Jamaicans, northeastern Jamaica, all the time. They write about the history, the culture, and the language of Jamaica. I think that they do a very good job because they write both novels and poetry, as well as nonfiction. I think that Erna Brodber has made Woodside, Jamaica come alive to many people. They bring the place to life. The 2 sisters often deal with rural Jamaica in juxtaposition with cities of the Caribbean, the United States, the UK, and Canada. And so I think that Velma Pollard, both of them have taught at UWI. Velma Pollard is mainly a linguist. She was Dean of Education at the University of the West Indies for a while. They're both retired now, but they continue to write. And Erna Brodber is a sociologist as well as a writer. In all of her works, she is a sociologist, a historian, and also a writer, mainly of fiction. And so my focus in this book is to compare the 2 of them. I guess the first the first time I heard about Erna Broadbent was in hearing about, I was at a conference and I heard about her book, Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home. It was her first major novel, and it sounded so much like my husband's family that I said, I came home and told my mother-in-law about the book, and I said, this is about family. This is about the Broadbents, but are the Broadbents related to the Bryans? And she said, oh, yes. The Broadbents were they, let's see, my father-in-law's mother was a Broadbent. And these, so these two sisters are related to him. I think that Velma has written quite a lot, and Erna has probably written more, but Velma writes mostly poetry. She wrote 5 books of poetry, Crown Point and Other Poems, Shame Trees Don't Grow Here. The one that I like best for the title is Philosophers I Know. The best philosophers I know can't read or write. And I think that sounds very sarcastic. And it's interesting. But her poetry is both witty and romantic sometimes. She also writes about family and writes about love, as well as her other writings where she, hello, Tom Bonner, and Steve Bonner. Well, they write about Dread Talk. She wrote about Dread Talk, the language of the Rastafarians, and she also wrote about Anansi. She has poems and writes a lot about Anansi. I think that Erna Broadbent has written several ethnographic works, but she is best known for her 5 novels. They are Jane and Louisa Will Soon Come Home, Mile, Louisiana. She actually wrote a book about Louisiana. And she wrote Nothing's Math and The World is a High Hill, which is a book of poetry. All of these books are interesting to read. They're hard. I think that Erna Broadbent writes in a kind of a post-colonial way, so that you have to keep up with the characters who go from place to place, and there are several narrators very often. I think that, but the writers show throughout their literature a fascination with resistance. They're not writing simple stories. I mean, they're also writing about breaking away from the normal, or they talk about the slaves who broke away and became free. They had to get to their freedom in one way or the other, runaways. I think that one of the interesting things is that in both books we do see the story of the Morat Bay Rebellion, in which people in the Southwest were fighting to get the corruption out of the courts. And it is a part of Morat Bay Rebellion, is a part of Nothing's Math, and a part of Mile, which was her second novel. I have a lot here. I'm trying to think of how I'm going to talk about it. But I think that although Broadbent and Pollard pay much attention to male heroes like Marcus Garvey, for example, they make women the major characters in their novels. And in very many novels, Erna Broadbent names her characters Ella or Nellie. They're always fighting against the patriarchal society, and they establish their individuality in one way or the other. I just wanted to talk about a couple of the novels, and maybe the poetry. Um, the the narrator in Pollock's novel Homestretch realizes that Jamaica is not just tall; it is taller. That means that it's bigger than you think it is. I mean, there are so many people who are from Jamaica and also great athletes, great writers, or they're in movies and so forth, so that they are often taller. I think that of Ernest Butler and Velma College, Woodside, is a major part of their writing, and it's a lens through which they see most things. For example, the home of the character Carl in Velma's novel Carl is named Wood, and the village of the protagonist of Ernie Brodler's first novel, J.D. Louisa, is described as Woodside. And she has written many novels about this place. The character, a major character of the Rainmaker's Mistake, as a matter of fact, he did cause the problem of the Rainmaker's Mistake, is named Woodville. This comes up all the time. Well, I think we should probably talk about Louisiana, for example. Well, in the second and third chapter, I talk about Louisiana and also Mile. And I think that in Mile, her second book, she discusses spirit thievery. And in Louisiana, she talks about spirit possession. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in the novel Mile, there are two characters who are in danger of losing their spirit, because there's an old man who tries to trick Anita by somehow using opiate to enter her body. And she doesn't understand it, of course. She's a very smart girl. She does really well in school, and her teachers wanted to go on and to become a pupil teacher and then to go to university. But this guy is working on her mind from a distance. But she is able to get away from him and his phobia, because she I guess the people who are the Mialists and the people using Cumina are able to get rid of his phobia, and actually he dies as a result of this decision of his to attempt to enter this woman's mind, this child's mind, really. There's another woman that's very important in Mile, and that's Ella O'Grady. She's biracial. She's the daughter of a policeman and a black woman. That's somewhere on the side, but just the way that she does this, that you get to know all these characters, you learn so much. But actually, the important thing is her spirit is sort of stolen by when she marries this white guy who is a dramatist. And she thinks that he's listening to her all the time. She's listening to her stories about the Woodside. But actually, he is making fun of all of this stuff. And he does a story, he does a play that is like a musical. And really, he laughs at all the characters. It becomes sort of a coon show. And she goes home to St. Thomas, I think. Because really Jamaica, because she can't take that man anymore. Plus, she has almost lost her mind of her spirit, because She just wants to get back to herself. And actually, one a Milist, who is an old man, but he is one of the higher spirits in that novel. He's able to use his mile to ritual to gain back to get back her spirit, and she actually becomes a teacher in the community and adds greatly to the community. That's all in Mile, although there are other things in Mile. I think that is a story, but I compare that story to Louisiana because Louisiana is more about spirit possession. It's also a novel in which voodoo plays a very important role. Yes, I think that the woman Ella Townsend goes to Jamaica from. She really was born in Jamaica, but she returned from New York, where she was a student at Columbia. She was a student of anthropology, and she wanted to study Southwest Louisiana. It's interesting that Erna Bradford does so much with Louisiana and Jamaica. There's a St. Mary in both parts, in both the state and the country. And anyway, there are relationships. But in that story, she goes to Louisiana. She talks to this old lady that's named Nanny, but her real name is Sue Ann Grant King. And anyway, she learns a lot about Louisiana from her, but Southwest Louisiana. But in a few weeks, she dies. For she is very old. She has been a leader. She's been a leader in the longshoremen strikes. She's a leader in Garvey. She was a Garveyite. And it's interesting that the Garvey centers there were more, and there are more Garvey centers in Louisiana than in any other place in the world. But she was a leader, even though she was at this point very old. The interesting thing is that after she dies, she continues to talk on tape. Ella Townsend can hear her, even though she's dead, because there is a relationship between the dead and the living, and Ella Townsend becomes a reader. As a matter of fact, she moves to New Orleans, where she works with Madame Marie, and they teach her to listen to people and to read their thoughts. All of that is a part of Louisiana. It's just a kind of interesting that there are the living and the dead, and they're talking. She becomes her spirit is enlarging because she takes on the ideas and the thoughts of both Nanny and her friend Louisa, and then she becomes a total consciousness together. Well, Erna Bradford continues to write. At this time, I think she is doing research on her family, but she wrote 5 novels earlier, and I'd like you to read the book to find out about all of them. At the end of, I just want to point out that she's continuing to have an influence because there are many young writers who are very interested in her, and one of them is Marlon James, who wrote the book he wrote the book with the brief history of 7 killings that won the 2015 Man Booker Prize. and the OCN Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature. Recently, Marlon James named Ernest Brodber Mile one of the 5 novels that everyone should read because of her unique and early use of speculative and Afrocentric fiction. I think that is interesting because people are beginning, and they are beginning to read more of Erna Brodber because her interest in speculative fiction, which has a long line in African American literature and includes such people as Samuel Delany and Octavia Butler. Many writers of the 21st century have recognized her influence. And Erna Brodber and Velma Pollard are both conscious of the many connections of folklore and culture in Jamaica, Africa, and the United States, and all people of the African diaspora. So I'd love you to ask me some questions. Yes. Roseanne, Dr. Adelaide.
You get to sit in the colorful chair, yeah.
I get to sit in the colorful chair. Most of all, y'all should buy this book. It is just gorgeous. And I'll tell you the most important thing to say about this book. I have known Violet Bryan my whole career. So I bought the book and I committed to teach it out of pure loyalty and love. It is utterly gorgeous. All right, this sentence after sentence. I usually mark books because I'm going to teach them. And then I said, don't forget this, I'm just going to start marking delicious sentences. And before I forget, this is an incredibly important historic document because this is a brand new book. So that's the first exam question ever written about this book. My students did right before midterm. I asked them about home stretch. They loved home stretch. Yeah, the students loved Homestretch, which is this novel about homecoming to Jamaica. And I wanted to start with a question that a student asked, because we had Violet on campus, and it was lovely. We never got to the questions, and I want to give some of my students credit. But there's a student who is herself of an immigrant family. And the question that she asked was this: in spending all this time with these women in their books, all right, and yourself being kind of from South Carolina, which has its own relationships to Jamaica, and Jamaica has these relationships to Louisiana, and here you are in Louisiana, and you're in this multinational Jamaican family. Indrakshi Itwaru asked me, she said, well, what I wanted to ask her was, did spending all this time with them and their work change your own ideas about what home means? And and you have literally, I can say this fact, because you spent more time with their work probably than anyone on earth except them. And she's like, these ladies are obsessed with home.
Right, that's true. It's true. I used to tell everybody that I'm from Florence, South Carolina. But as a matter of fact, I was at Mount Holyoke with the school, and I said, I'm from Florence. So, Italy? I said, other Florence. But I have always been a person who talked about home. Although I just think that Florence doesn't seem was not as close to me now, of course, since I'm in New Orleans. But I do feel that that home is an attachment that I kind of understand. I asked a lot of my students, I said, where are you from? And they said, what? What do you mean? I said, I'm a Marine scholar, I'm from here, there, everywhere. But I don't know. I think that everybody sort of feels that they are from somewhere. There are places that have made a real impression and have, pull them in, no matter what they do. They're always sort of pulled into homes.
I have to say, and we need a sociologist for this, because I did the same thing with students who ask the question. I think it's an ethical question. I agree with you. I agree with, Roger. Oh, this matters. But frequently I do get that asked from students, like, what's the weight of this question? I said, that's always a big question. But I guess the other question, and I don't know among the people here, how many people kind of know Jamaica? And I pretend to know it. I get paid to study it. It's amazing. My late father, he's like just marvelous. So like you kind of study things about the Caribbean and Black people, and they pay you. This is your job. Amazing. It's pretty amazing. But one of the other things my students ask a lot, and I don't know how long, and maybe you could say something about this, how long this book has been in your head, how long it's been with you, because they said, and these are living authors.
Right.
They said what struck them through the whole book, through all the changes in their work. If you go like, sort of from wild to nothing's mad, they said that the fact that Jamaica is newly independent, all right? And even though their lives begin, it's like this thing, always in the back of their both writers' head. And they wondered, both when you interviewed them, if that came, now that we're 50 years out of independence. And I kind of think for people in the U.S., a little bit thinking about like 50 years out from the Civil Rights Act. Like, I guess, has their nationalism changed? Has the way they're thought about in Jamaica changed? Because they were like right in the thick. And my students didn't know anything about the Caribbean, but they picked up on that. They were like, these ladies are writing about the fact that Jamaica has to mean something.
Yes. Well, I'm sure it does mean quite a bit. I think that, we think about it. I was surprised to know that they just got their independence from UK in 1962. I said, oh, really? I mean, it didn't mean completely everything at all because, it's an old country to me. And one of the stories that Erna Bradford writes is about the Arawak Indians. She writes when Bobby Susan. And before Christopher Columbus came, there were many people there, and they were Indians, and there were and before slavery. Was there a time before slavery? I don't know. Before slavery, it took involved itself, they were there, the Indians there, and there were others. So I think that Jamaica has been around a long time. It was even called Jamaica or something in this by the Indians. But I think that Erna Gardner and Delta Powell know it very well, and they feel it's a part of them. And as a matter of fact, that part, Northeast Jamaica is very much a part of the good side. Although I think that Velma Powell lives in Kingston, and her sister, Erna Bradford, still lives in Woodside. Although they travel all over the place, and Erna Bradford Velma Powell has spent a lot of time in Guyana. And so they go to different parts of the world. But they still feel that Jamaica is their home. And, they know the culture and the folklore. And they realize also how close it is to Africa, especially Ghana. I think there's a close connection between Ghana and Jamaica.
Have either of them lived in Ghana? Because they've lived everywhere. Have either of them lived anywhere in Africa? Because I started at one point trying to keep track, but they've lived all over.
Yeah, I don't think they've lived in Ghana. There are family members who have lived in Africa.
And your last interviews with them were early 2000s.
Yes, it was right around the time of Katrina. As a matter of fact, it was funny that we were, I was in Jamaica in 2005. And it was a time of storms. I mean, I could not imagine there was a hurricane that came into Jamaica where we were there. And as a matter of fact, we almost were able to get out. But there was the last plane for a little while. And then when we got home, we thought things were okay, but then here comes Katrina and almost wiped us out. And so it was a stormy time. But I interviewed both of them and the first time, and we just talked a lot about what they were writing and how they were doing it, and I just enjoyed reading them. But I had met Velma Pollard at convention before that, and Erna Broderick too. I soon began to meet them at various situations. And now we talk on the phone and we talk on computer. That's it. And after the book came out, they both enjoyed it very much. But Velma Pollard said, well, there's a couple of mistakes. And Erna Broderick said, remember, it's not Liz, it's Lexi. I mean, that's her nickname. And I think that Velma Pollard wanted to know that she also spent a great deal of time in Woodside, even though she had traveled.
But that gets back to the home question, that that's one of the things that she brought up. It's like, I did, like, yeah, don't make me the person who's far from Woodside.
Yeah.
And I guess my other question is about their biographies, which I couldn't figure out from the book now, having read it twice. Are they religious practicing themselves? In terms of like, what do they consider their religion? Because my students had endless questions. Because there's like African religions are all through this book. Lumina is all through their work, but then Christianity never goes anywhere. But yeah. So, and I guess I wondered, maybe not asking what their practice is, but kind of what their perspective on religion is.
I think that Velma Pollard is very much an Anglican. And she's still, that's her major religion. She always looks at things. She's kind of off-handed. She does studies of Rastafarian thought and so forth, but she doesn't become a Rastafarian. But Erna Broderick is very different. She actually takes it on. I mean, she joined one of the tribes of Rastafarian. She became a Rastafarian. I forgot what tribe it was. But she takes things seriously. In a way, she's not a lot like Zora Neale Hurston. I mean, Zora Neale Hurston said you can't really understand something unless you do it. And so she did. She came, she studied voodoo, and she practiced voodoo. That was Zora Neale Hurston. She did everything, but then she became very conservative at the end of her life. It's very confusing. But I think that Velma, I think that Erna Broderick would say that she is not just Anglican. So she's also a Rastafarian, and she really practices the religions and thoughts.
Yeah, no, because I think I get if students sign up for my classes, because Tulane students, it's this luxury of choice. It's like a buffet; they can do whatever they want. But they often choose a class on the Caribbean because they feel like they're very woke. They have all these critiques of everything Western, and one of the things I love about both this book is it really gives you a sense of the way both sisters write through all Jamaican experiences, because my students very much want people either to be Protestants or they're voodoo practicing. They're not, and we don't, I'm not even sure the United, I don't know if my students or the society gives people permission to be kind of all the things. And I wondered, before I get back to the text itself, You mentioned that Marlon James, and if you haven't read A Brief History of Seven Killings, that's your second piece of homework. It is so good. It is so good. And apparently Marlon James has a podcast that's really, really, really just very funny. If you care about writing, I forget what it's called. It's got some kind of a clever name in the title. Like it doesn't have his name, but you do Marlon James podcast. Are they famous people in how is it like? What's their identity in Jamaica now? Because it's I partly that's Woodside, it's Kingston, it's university.
Well, I think that they are well known, especially Erna Broadway. She's well done worldwide. But in Jamaica, they are well, I think that people probably know them, but not as well as they know some others now. I'm trying to think of the poets. There's some poets who are just popular poets, and that's Belmont College area. But they're both nevertheless, I think they're rather quiet in a way. I mean, I don't know. But I think that when I was going to say that, even though Erna Broadway practices other religions, I know more about Christian religion from her than from church. Whenever they talk about Isaiah or I talk about Elijah and Elisha, whatever, I said, oh yes, Artie said whatever, because that's sort of in my mind. She does know the Bible very well. And but I don't think they're as well known as they could be. Okay. Yes.
What has been your personal emotional connection to them? What has made you feel? What gave you the intent to write about them? What has inspired you so much about them?
Oh, yes.
Personally.
Well, I think because they look at things deeply, and well, I remember one of my favorite writers was George Manley Hopkins.
Gerard.
Hopkins. Listen,
Gerald Hopkinson.
Gerard Manley Hopkins.
Gerard Manley Hopkins. That was he was a poet, and I just thought that he looked at religious thought very much, and so he was one of my favorites, and one of my favorites was Emily Dickinson, because she was so comical in a way. I mean, but serious. I mean, in thought, and so why do I read? Why do I read so many of their works? I guess I think that Velma Pollard, probably I more enjoy her poetry. I enjoy her poetry because she makes us think about different places, various places, not just Jamaica, but Guyana, Cuba. She visits Belize, so it's kind of a broader. Her concepts are broader, but both of them, and Erna Broadway especially, kind of makes you go through thought process. She calls it her head hurting fiction. That is true. You go through a well get your head hurting, because it's hard to keep up with the characters, but then you kind of wonder, and how is this person related to that person, and what did she mean? So you do have to think very seriously about these works. That's probably why I kept up with them. Have kept up with them because they never stop writing.
I have a question.
I thought that Bryan's always been interested in culture, the culture of the community and how that affects writers. And she did that when she studied New Orleans and literature. She did a similar thing in comparing writers, white and black, in New Orleans throughout, who were influenced by each other, by the culture of the place. And also, I think in exploring Jamaica, she found a culture in Jamaica that affected the writing. And it started with a graduate course in Russian literature, where they studied city and literature. And that's always an interesting thing to study writers, to see how they affect each other, where they come from the same place, and how they differ when they look out at the world. And I think that's, if you read her book in New Orleans writers, and you read the Jamaican writers, you can see it's a similar type of thing.
The myth of New Orleans. My other book is called The Myth of New Orleans in Literature. And yes, I do have this interesting culture. So that I want to write a book about Florence. Not just Florence, but my life has been more than Florence. I guess I left there when I was about 18.
I was gonna say, that's super interesting. You left when you were 18 because the book is on the one hand, the book is very Jamaican. On the other hand, it's as that I'm going to do it over the summer is to actually walk through all their movement.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I did want to. I have a long list of questions, but the one I do want to get in, I shared this question because I said you literally have spent more time with their writing than anyone on earth, and that's a particular kind of commitment, which I find interesting. And I should say to everybody in the room, Vaughn heard me say this before. I actually studied Caribbean literature in graduate school and did not realize these women were sisters because it just never came up. Like, it was kind of like you were just so deep down into studying, like what is going on, Miles, that you just completely ignored, like their relationships with the world. And I wanted to pick up though on what is, and I forget the numbers of titles, not just what is chapter 6, it's about gender and identity, but something that has come up in our conversations about the book before. Would you say that they are a little bit cynical or skeptical about marriage? Because there's a point early on, it's not in chapter 6 where you say, man, Colin's always calling marriage a cage, but then, and you point out that in all of their, family relationships, they come and they go up and down. Like the marriage is portrayed in their writing.
Yes.
It's treacherous.
Don't tell anybody.
From one of the most well-known families of our New Orleans cultural scene, that they're interesting. And I don't know if you talked to them about that specifically for chapter 6. But it's throughout, it's a strange thing that runs throughout their work.
Right, it's true. I think that Belma Powell writes more about it. And she has married, but she talks about marriage as a cage, and she talked about it in the poetry. It's just that I think that it's it's partly because the country is very patriarchal in some ways. That men are, thought to be the leaders. However, they have had a woman president, and we have not. And I don't know, America's bizarre. But for people are criticizing Biden, and he's done so much for the country, and you can't blame Biden for what's happening in what the Russians are doing to Ukraine or anything. I mean, they're just doing all kinds of things. I think that the marriage, though, was an important part of many of the short stories, especially, and maybe not as much in novels. Although I did mention that novel in Mile, I think that Ella O'Grady was very hurt by her husband. And that comes up from time to time.
I guess the other thing in terms of what you brought up in terms of patriarchy in Jamaica, and then like it's easy for the United States to be like wagging its finger, but we're like, and I wonder, and it doesn't come up in the book so much, although England comes up in the book a lot. What do we know about the way like their writing is received in England? Like, are they, because there's that whole Caribbean diaspora there, or also what they think about it. Because they go everywhere and they have an opinion about it. But most of their traveling characters are traveling characters in New York or in Louisiana.
Yeah, right. So I think that that Donald Howard goes to Canada quite a lot, and so her children go to Canada and going back and forth. Well, I think that even though they travel, they go back to Jamaica, and that's one of the things that I say that they write from a local perspective. For many Caribbean writers are not living there, like Michelle Cliff or something. She lives in Georgia, or used to Jamaica. And of course, what's about Marlon James? He lives in
He lives in Brooklyn now.
Yeah. A lot of people who write about the Caribbean live somewhere else, so they remember it. So they tell us that from just a perspective. So yeah, I do.
Do they and so they because I hadn't thought about that with them in terms of where, not just that they live there, but they actually write there, and that's pretty distinctive if we count up Caribbean writers. Yeah, who are writing now. Most of them are not writing.
Yes.
In the Caribbean, they're writing somewhere else.
Because then they have to think about publishers, and many of the books were published at first, in England, in UK, the UK, People Tree Press, and so forth. And then, but Louisiana, that novel was published by University of Mississippi, the University Press of Mississippi. That's why I thought of it.
Louisiana was first published by Mississippi? I didn't realize that.
Right. But some of them were published by the UWI. But it is kind of hard to get things out. They're published in Jamaica or published, I guess, in the Caribbean.
I will say my other kind of advertising moment for everybody listening is the University Press of Mississippi. In terms of, I didn't realize it went back that far. Because what year was Louisiana published?
Oh, like 1990. 4 or 5.
Yeah, early, yeah. So, but University Press of Mississippi, and like everybody likes to look down on Mississippi and dump on Mississippi, and they've earned a lot of that. The University Press of Mississippi, not only publishing this book, but it has been committed to Caribbean studies and getting Caribbean work published in the United States. And essentially, I don't think they would say this, they won't say reparations, but like this is the wealthiest nation on earth, which is why all this publishing happens here. And the fact that so much of it is kind of navel gazing, that if it's not about the United States, it's just not going to get published. And I didn't realize it went back quite that far, but University Press of Mississippi has had a huge commitment to publishing this kind of work, Caribbean studies work, particularly women writers, things that deal with culture that aren't like, you can sell politics to anyone. Although I kind of feel like you should have had a Kamala Harris book with your book, right? Did you send her a copy? We should send her a copy.
Yeah.
Did you send her a copy? She had Kamala Harris. She has a vice president's residence. She cares about Jamaicans in diaspora. We can get the book center to send it, because then it'll look official and not like, we're up to anything. No, it's legit. It can come from the book center.
Right, that's true.
I could talk forever and I'll keep at it, but please, like, the floor is semi-open, so people, if people have other questions, because I have, the one question that I did want to ask at this time was, you talk particularly with Broadburg, And poet is a poet. I think of all poetry is kind of Afrofuturist. Like poetry to me is a futurist genre, a speculative genre. And is that? It feels like there's a real shift in Broderick's work, you know, to the Afrofuturist stuff. And you said that people are kind of reading her, like they picked up on it again. But do you see an actual change, or is it that other people have said, like, oh, you're like this Afrofuturist stuff?
Yeah.
That's new to us, but she's been sort of doing it all along.
Right, that's true. I think that, you know, even from Jane and Louisa, which was published in something like 1994.
I think even before, because I feel like,
yeah, 89. Oh, I did all of
Yeah,
this stuff, you know. But oh yeah, it was earlier, because that was the first book, maybe. But it was very difficult to read. I mean, because things don't happen in time progression. She might be talking about the present that goes to the past, and you know, somehow might jump to the future. So I think that she has been doing some Afrofuturism all along. But that is a new term. And so that people did get interested in her because she'd been doing it already, but she has gaps in time and narrative.
You should hand some fancy graduate student that, because someone should write that as an essay, because it's Afrofuturism before it's cool, and you've liberated me, because I don't know how many else. When I first read Jane Louisa Wilson from Home, it hurt. I was like, I'm too confused.
Oh yes, right. Wait a minute, what are you talking about?
Maybe I'm not smart enough for graduate school. Maybe I need to drop out. That's not an overstatement. It's a hard. I know many of y'all have read it. I recommend it because you stick with it, and then you're like, and then it's the kind of thing that you come back to. But I was like, wow, I'm lost.
Right. Yeah. And she was a historian. I mean, she is. So I think she got her PhD in history. So all these things come together. She's always thinking about history and as well as sociology, anthropology.
I forget, like, because Pollard's the one who has like a sociology degree.
That's under
Broderick's the one, yeah, because they have these very social sciencey degrees.
Yes.
For people that are just these incredible, like, as someone, you know, she was Xavier students because you had all those scientists. And you're like, you do realize you can do both things. It's like,
yes.
you don't die of it.
Not me.
Well, no, it is one of the things that I love about this book, as I said before, is the way that you get a real full sense of Jamaica from it. And you also get a real sense of their lives that are way more complicated. Like, I actually came to this expecting their literary lives to dominate the book more than it does. That's all there, but you get a real sense of them.
It's good.
So it's but are there other questions, or because I can keep going, and I know that's always, and we're small enough that everybody in the room should get at least one question.
It can be a wild question. So what were you talking about?
But, I haven't really gotten into it yet. But the piece on the spirit, you know, the different types of spirit, you know, the Jamaican spirit and the Louisiana spirit, and that difference, I think. Could you talk about that again a little bit?
Yes, let me see. Well, I think that I just think about Nancy, the folklore, you know, that seems to be, that's maybe Jamaican and African spirit, where Nancy was a spirit, but is a spirit, and it's also kind of a spider. They tend to think of Nancy as a spider. But, well, that's something that we don't talk about too much in America. But I guess if you could compare Nancy to Brer Rabbit and trickery and so forth. Now, I think that the Jamaican spirit seems to be clever. I don't know, perseverance. No, I don't know. So that's true. It's
Things with people practicing, like dead people coming back and working with people's minds who've been affected. In other words, particularly in Erna, I think Erna thinks that if you live in a white world and you adopt what the English tell you, you're actually sort of crazy. You need to have the African background, and so she introduced a lot of African religion as a way of curing people who go insane or lose their, that type of thing. And she plays around with that a lot.
We should do Rainmaker's Mistake for Summer Book Club. I'm looking at people in the room I want to hear. I was going to say, sort of, do you think Jamaica is a place where people are more willing to think in those spiritual terms? Because one of my students, my most diligent, I would say, he said that he criticized his classmates in his homework. He said that they wanted to make everything. They were much more comfortable talking about politics and about diaspora and migration. He's like the whole second half of the book, especially, and particularly Rainmaker's Mistake, but also earlier. There's this whole spiritual world.
Yes.
And the one I found it because I keep finding it and losing it. When you're writing about Queenie. And Queenie recounts that Woodville told her fellow laborers about their birth coming from yams.
Yes.
But knowing that the reader might be quite skeptical about all of this, she adds, we began as yams. Mr. Charlie Seeds turned into yams in us, okay? And I think it's that, and I think Queenie is also Broadburn, knowing that some of her readers are going to be skeptical.
Right. That was the funniest thing. I mean, to think that people actually believed they were made of yams, and that they came from yams, and that was they were told that, but they were actually slaves. This was before emancipation, and this is in the Rainmaker's Mistake. So they were workers. They were just considered, and so the slave owner told them that they were made of yams. And they weren't even human, I guess. So but they learned that they weren't quite human, and that they were actually the daughters and sons of the slave foreman, or either the slave owner and one of the women slaves. So they found out who they were. But after slavery, they also had to decide what they were going to do. They moved to another part of Jamaica, and they some people actually developed a sea machine. They developed some things, and some of them moved to America. They moved to Canada or wherever they went to. They were not just staying home anymore. They moved around to find out just who they were, and that was the liberation that they felt.
That's I'll say it. It is my favorite chapter. I'm performing according to stereotype. I love this whole book, but it is it 5? Yes. But it is chapter 5 that's my favorite because she does Rainmaker's Mistake. We really should do Summer Book Club because you say it that it's this Afrofuturist quality, but like the whole history of British colonial slavery in Jamaica is in there, in the book. And it's a brilliant piece of writing for that reason. I do have a question, of course, maybe about the sisters, but not about writing about them. One of my teachers used to say that Americans have an idea of merry old Africa, that everything was great in Africa before we got here. No one was mean to anyone, no one exploited anyone. But I also think that in the United States, because we do such a terrible job talking about slavery, we have this idea that everywhere else they do a great job.
Yeah.
And I wondered what the public conversation is about slavery in Jamaica. And where their conversation fits in, because you kind of want to be well, it's an all black country, and everybody's thinking about it all the time, but maybe not.
Not really. I mean, and Ernest Brodber and Velma Powell never talked too much about slavery at all. They don't, even in the Rainmaker's Mistake, those people that were slaves were called servants and workers. They don't say slaves. I don't think that. So I feel that, I don't know. It's an acceptance, but it's also a way of walking around that, So what is really funny about this whole thing about in America now, there are people that don't even want to talk about slavery. I mean, it never existed, did it? Right. That was just a joke. I mean, well, we don't want to talk about what is it called when they race
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory. I mean, what are these universities doing trying to make people crazy? Talking about critical race theory. I remember one of my friends at Mount Holyoke from West Virginia was really paranoid, reading at how terrible America had treated African Americans. She said, "Do you believe it? Could it have been that bad?" I mean,
Oh my goodness.
I don't want to hear it. Well, she did want to hear it too, because, but it was the first time that she'd heard that much about slavery and Jim Crow and all of that, and the fights, the wars, especially the Civil War, the movement. And I don't think she really studied it, that much. In South Carolina, they didn't want to call it the Civil War. When I was a child, it was the war between the states. I said, "Oh, the war between the states." That's as much as you need to know.
South Carolina is exceptional. I saw, and I come on, Roseanne, do math. It was in 2011. The pro-Confederate crowd, they rented out like a hall to have a big party to celebrate the start of the Civil War when they stood up for themselves. This was in 2011. And I thought, wow, and it was covered like in the society pages, like it was a normal function with normal people. And I thought, this is insane. But
The DC creds.
yeah, exactly. And it was 2011 because that was like 150 years since the start of the war. And I was like, like if you go, like in the living section of the Times-Picayune, it was like just in the living section of the regular paper, that this wasn't ridiculous. I did want to, speaking of education, I did want to ask, and this was one of the questions that I was holding. I wondered if you have a sense, or if you asked them directly about their, opinions and thoughts about formal university education. Because on the one hand, they had a ton of it. On the other hand, all of their books are filled with these people where it didn't go well, who dropped out of school or found it really alienating. And I wondered I know Sergio and I have had some good conversations about, there's a lot of thinking about what are we doing in universities? Not the critical race theory stuff, but are we regimenting people? And I don't know if they have a perspective on it as people that, as I said, all their characters seem very upset.
Yes, but well, I think that the characters themselves, and the authors, do feel that everyone should have an education and do very well. The fact that people can be very competitive in Jamaica, and then there's that question of who's better, Ernest Brodber or Velma Powell. This I can't be. I mean, you know, I do well all throughout. So they do people raise people in their families. I mean, I knew in my family, for example, I mean, there was who's the bravest? I mean, and it was a real problem. You know, it's like, oh no, so-and-so's the brightest, and this is the next, and this is the next. And well, this person, she's good at fixing things. She's good at, oh, she's best in school. And so I think that the competitiveness is important in Jamaica and in many places, many countries.
I want a whole class full of students because I can just assign essays to them because I find this real tension because it's clear that this level of achievement is important to them. It's the culture they live in.
Right.
But they write all these characters that are like,
That's true.
"Okay, this messed up my life."
Right. And many people don't ever get to go to university. Some people don't get to go to high school or anything like that because it is very, I mean, you have to pass certain tests throughout. You're always being tested.
Are they taught? Are their books taught? Like, you know, in terms of, you know, like, this is a thing you should learn in school. I mean, and maybe you don't know the answer to that question because I wondered about that because
That's true.
in the bit where you're talking about the way they talk about is it Brathwaite or Walcott that talks about nation language?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Brathwaite. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, people would probably teach Brathwaite before they would teach Pollock or something. And
Is that just because he's older, or he's a man, or he's an official national something or other?
yes. Well, because he's a man. All right. They would teach their Walcott.
Well, no, because I'm thinking about that though, because Walcott and Brathwaite are a little bit older than these women, but not by a lot.
Yeah, right. That's well, I don't know. They looked up to Brathwaite, but I don't think he was that much older.
Yeah, so it's so you know, I think you may be right. Like, why is it that exactly you said it in Jamaica they would absolutely for sure teach Brathwaite, they'd for sure teach Walcott, but they're not. This is basically not quite the same generation.
Yeah, right.
And
They've been taught someone named Wilson Harris. I mean, who? I don't know. There are certain people that are taught.
No.
Lorna Goodison, but I don't think she's taught. I think she's just listened to.
does she recite? Is that plays or what is Goodison?
She recites her poetry. Yeah, right. It's very important to be out there to perform as well as to write. And I think they do. You can find Belma's Power on the computer very much reciting poetry. So.
Is it them that used to have like the camp, the old side that people could go to?
Oh yeah, that was in
That was Broadway.
Called Black Space.
And was that in the 80s?
It was up until very recently. So most of the 80s, I guess. No, 80s, 90s. And as a matter of fact, I don't know whether she stopped. But I think she.
No, when it came up on campus, my students were like, "Oh, can we go?" And still do that. And are they letting us go anywhere? Can we go places yet? Can we study abroad? I was supposed to go to Jamaica this year, but Caribbean Studies it's gone electronic.
Oh, really? This year?
Yeah, no, Caribbean Studies has gone electronic. Is someone presenting your book? Oh, well, no, we must talk because for those of you, because it is going to be virtual, so other people can attend. We should bookstore broadcast some of it. They have this event where any new book that's come out is presented, but someone like another literature scholar will have to say, this is a great book. This is like, you don't get to describe your own book.
Like you?
Yeah. But see, I'm a historian. I'm not like these people who are historians and also write poetry on the side, which is also Brathwaite. Like, that's what people forget. What do you say about the Jamaican? Because Barbara is wait, get it right. Barbara's the historian. She's the sociologist. I forget. Yeah, now it's a competitive cast.
In history.
It's,
degree in history.
Did
Yeah.
did it fascinate them that you, coming from Louisiana, are writing this book? Is that of interest? Because I want to get back to Mama.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's like like you didn't come from Ohio to write this book. You came from South Carolina and Louisiana to write this book.
Right. I don't know. I know that my sister-in-law, who is originally from Jamaica, but Ernie Bronner asked her to take her to Southwest Louisiana when she was writing the book Louisiana, and she, Dr. Margaret Bryan, learned a lot by interviewing a nun who was in Southwest Louisiana, knew many things. And we wonder if that is prototype for them, possibly.
Oh, she is. She must be. She must be.
Yeah.
It's
But I think that they probably were surprised that I was interested in writing the book. But we continue to talk about it, and they're quite happy.
But I think, like, at first, for me, I'm thinking about place and about Woodside and about Jamaica, and thinking about your first book, and this is the other reason I want Louisianans to read this book. You know, your first book is about New Orleans and literature, and there's a New Orleans that's real and you live in it, and there's a New Orleans that becomes an idea. And I think both of these writers are trying to get people to understand both Jamaica as an idea and as a place, and that both things are real.
Right.
So, but did we do reading before? Because do we want to read? We should have, well, either from the book, or we should have a piece of poetry if you have it.
Well, if we have a piece of poetry, we could close on that. We could close this part of the discussion on that note. And anyone who is interested, we have copies of the book. And if you'd like to have a one-on-one or two-on, or just be able to everybody interact together as
Do we have to
signs
have
the
the fly
books.
in there? Do we have it? I bet someone could find it on the phone because it's a wonderful poem.
Yeah.
While they're looking for that, I'd just like to tell everyone, thank you for coming out. We are just now beginning to do in-person events, and we're restructuring the space to accommodate those type of activities. So we encourage you to come on by. We'll be here at least until 6 o'clock. You can get a copy of the book and have it autographed. And also, we encourage you to follow the crowd and follow us on Crowdcast. And you will receive alerts for upcoming events. And we do have books from previous events available in the store. We also encourage you to visit our website at www.readcbc.com, and you can order, they won't be signed, but you can order your copies there as well. Thank you again, both of you, for joining us.
That's so funny, girl.
And thank you, our audience, those people, for coming out and being with us this evening. We appreciate that. And look around and tell other people about Community Book Center and all of the businesses on Bayou Road, as a matter of fact. Thank you. You got it? You found it?
We should always finish the formal part with some reading.
This is just from the book where Velma Powell was talking about her father, and
Okay.
She said, oh, and mother. My mother, she said, my mother used book words in the community and at school. She was a lead, a teacher. She would know how to use words like arrive. My father spoke Creole. He was into amateur dramatics. A doctor who came from America and his son in Kingston would come up to the country, and together with my father, they formed a drama club. They would read and dramatize plays such as Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. My father would play the trial scene, and he would proclaim, "Make room," as the Duke said, "make room and let him stand before our face. Shylock, the world thinks, and I think so too, that thou but leadst this fashion of thy malice to the last hour of act. Shylock, I have possessed your grace of what I purpose, and by our holy Sabbath have I sworn to have the due and forfeit of my bond." That was kind of I wanted to read from the fly, but I forgot to bring it.
It's in Crown Point and other poems. You should all buy it.
Yes.
It really is it's an exquisite poem.
Right. Right. But I have enjoyed talking today. And it makes me think
Yep.
about Yes.
Y'all who don't own the books should come by, chat, get your books beautifully signed.
Right.
Buy your own little blue markers because you will want to.
Here.
Yeah.